Thank you for joining us. And we have this topic that is so relevant, and we're still living in these times when we are coming to terms with what is going around, how to survive, what to do with the cost that we have. So many conversations around it. So I want to first, the only lady we have on the panel, I'll start with that. So otherwise it will be like gender or like skewed towards one side. Starting with you, Jessica, my first,
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
Likewise, having you, all of you here on this panel. So, what has happened in the last 1.5 year, more than that, is that, startups have been forced to innovate. They have been forced to reimagine, and there's a certain kind of shift that businesses are witnessing.
Yes.
Right? From cash burn to right sizing, so many things. Jessica, what has been your story over the last 1.5 year?
Completely. There have been a lot of changes, a lot of uncertainty in the past 1.5 year. I remember when we were in March 2020, being a 4-year-old company, we were at our peak, working with great clients, great brands. And the biggest of the biggest clients were affected. So it was something that we couldn't run away from. And like you said, cash burn and right sizing. When we talk about 2020, for me at least, this was a larger problem back in 2020 more than 2021. It suddenly hit you. You had no idea what was happening. You would not know when this would end. It was very difficult for me to control a team of 20 people that time, with clients completely going off, because since it was the first time for everyone around, no one knew when this would end or what would happen or how would the customer respond. So that was a time which was, I think, at least for the PR industry or the entire brand industry, we were the most hit, where we were just trying to understand the sentiment of the clients. Moving forward, we saw August onwards, suddenly the peak again in consumer behavior, in them going out, and the retail industry booming. And when 2022 hit, for us, I think we were more adaptive to the situation, because once it hits you, you sort of have learnings and feedbacks from what had happened a year ago. So the only thing that I have maintained over the past year is, when it comes to sizing, is not to hire extra or not to let go of too many people. Is because when I'm a service industry, clients would come and go to me. When we look at brands coming and going, 3 to 6 month period where they will sign a contract. Now, if I keep letting too many people go and letting too many people come in, I am creating extra burden on my internal team and myself to keep training. So for me, the key was to maintain the right balance of people, where I can handle the workload, do not increase my cash flow too much, but do not decrease the work capacity, just in case the kind of brands that I'm looking to work with come in. And the biggest learning that I had this year in 2021 was adaptability. You are living in a very dynamic environment. People are consuming, but they're consuming products which have become essential in today's time. So it is that adaptability which needs to be very, very quick. You don't have time to strategize, you just have to act. So that was a few key things that I was focusing on over the past 1 year.
Neetish, what was your strategy like? What kind of how did you navigate the shift that is still on? What has been the story at your side?
Thanks, Ruhail. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's always great to be talking to Businessworld and like-minded peers. Essentially, the entire last year, we are pretty much a brick and mortar business, right? Unlike some of the other panelists who've been in the past few discussions, we're very focused on brick and mortar. We're not a tech company. We're not a services company. So since our focus is on brick and mortar, people weren't coming back to offices, right? And that was affecting sort of business. But how we mitigated all of this was our focus from the very beginning had been towards setting a different sort of co-working environment. When you talk about co-working in general in India, you think it's, people taking up 10, 20, 30 seats and, taking up temporary offices before they can build out their own space. We actually pivoted away from that model very soon into our formation of the company. And then we started focusing a lot on enterprises. So today, Smartworks as a model actually has more enterprises than we have startups or smaller companies who are looking at, setting up a temporary office. We have larger companies like, the likes of Samsung, Ernst & Young, Microsoft. We've got Amazon. All of these guys looking at setting up their regional headquarters and the corporate headquarters within our office spaces. Because of which, these companies are not the guys who are going to go back and leave their office spaces, right? They pretty much need that infrastructure. Yes, people were not coming to work, but their entire infrastructure to run offices, their server rooms, all of their, digital requirements were all running from the facilities. So while we'd all not seen the amount of growth, so just giving you a background, Smartworks has been growing at about 3x year on year. We started off in 2017 and in 4 years have grown to, about approximately 4.5 million square foot, which is the largest in India at this point of time in terms of managed office solutions. But last year, while the growth was slower, but we still grew. We grew at a 30% rate. We were very, very conscious on the kind of properties that we were going after, the kind of clients that we were trying to sign. And we were trying to make sure that at that trying time, we actually give back as much as possible to our clients. So we went back, negotiated with our landlords as well. Cumulatively, I think everyone worked together to sort of mitigate the risk. And very similar to Jessica's, feedback, in which I think last year was more of a challenge. Since September, October, we haven't really seen a lot of challenge. Well, yeah, there has been a second wave, but people still have had clarity. Last year, the challenge was no one knew what was going to happen, right? You were sitting at home. You didn't know if you were going to go back to work in a year's time or 2 years' time. You didn't know what was happening. But now, at least people have clarity. Vaccines are coming out. They know that they're going to come back to work either anywhere from October to January. So we've actually mitigated the entire risk, and now I think our business is growing stronger to sort of pivot and let's scale from here.
Just adding on to what Neetish said,
yes, please.
This year, I feel as it might be wrong for me to say this because there are news about the third wave coming. But even if the third wave comes, I feel all consumers and everyone out there have identified a pattern that a lockdown is going to happen. It's going to be affecting us for 2 months, and the minute that ends, it's all back to normal. So I think we're familiar with it's not a long-term lockdown now, so we're okay with laying low those 2 months, and brands and companies out there have also understood that this pattern is coming and going, and they have to just adapt to it.
I agree. I think we have got a handle on how it pans out and what is the response. I think as we move on, even if there are more waves, we will know how to adjust our business to it. Shivam, what has been your story? Was it as, were you as much as the receiving end as we heard about the other players here?
Right. So before I begin, thank you, Ruhail and the BW team for having all of us here. And so for us, it's been a little different than what the two stories we heard. So we have been at Leegality, we've been one of the fortunate companies whose business was actually impacted positively because of the lockdowns. Considering that we have been a digital documentation solution, and most of our client base has been enterprise. We saw a massive increase in adoption and the comfort in businesses to go digital with their documents. And in terms of our team size also, we have grown 3 times since the first lockdown was hit. And so overall, we saw that even before the pandemic, there used to be, for our market, people used to be hesitant to even execute low-risk documents which were worth 4-5 lakhs digitally. But through the pandemic, we saw that even multi-thousand crore deals were executed through our platform. Right. So in that way, we've been much more fortunate than a lot of companies around. And obviously, because of that, in terms of even financials, we did not face any issues per se. In fact, we became cash flow positive last year. And in terms of our revenue in the last 2 years, we have grown almost 10 times. So the effect for us has been very, very positive. And I think that's been our story.
Right. I know this pandemic has had different impact on different sectors. E-commerce is different, and a whole lot of other sectors. Vinayak, tell me your story of adjustment, reimagination, bringing that response quickly to this pandemic-induced, challenges. How did you pivot?
So technically, we didn't pivot a lot, right? We were in the digital phase where we all were looking for great adoption, right? And that's something that we very actively started looking at, saying that the digital adoption is here to kind of stay. And pandemic accelerated most of it, right? It gave us the opportunity to expand beyond India very aggressively. So while pre-pandemic, we were focusing only on the Indian market, we also started focusing on the global market during pandemic, because it became easier for taking meetings and converting clients. And we're also in the enterprise side of the business, where we're kind of targeting the entire, I would say, high value customers. And pandemic accelerated a lot of digital adoption for us, right? And in the video first space that we are, it became very easy for us to kind of convert clients, because a lot of production work that used to go on from outsourced locations had to kind of been brought on cloud. And the entire pandemic also made a lot of companies realize on the extra cost that was being spent. And everywhere there was a cost cutting scenario, right? I totally sympathize with what Neetish said in his kind of statement. Services businesses were impacted, and specific to his one, in the first phase of lockdown, a lot of people were lost in terms of what's going to happen. We were one of those few companies that actually gave up our office space, right? In kind of, understanding that we have to kind of save cash at the same time, look at the longer future, and safety being the first most importance for everyone. So summarizing that, we had great impact, a complete positive impact, and obviously pandemic has accelerated a lot of development and growth for us. Team size also, we have grown twice the size of what we were pre-pandemic. And in terms of a client base, now we are spread across 15 different countries.
In this pandemic, a lot of startups have been left, most of them, 70%, with little runaway as far as, cash burn is concerned. And for a startup, raising funds is such a critical issue, such a critical part, One, how are investors looking? Has it become difficult to raise funds now when you pitch, when you try to reach out? What is your reading of the market right now?
I wouldn't have a very personal insight to something like this. It's because we're a full self-funded company since the past 4 years. We've never reached out to any sort of investors or funding company. But yes and no, both would be my question. When I look at my, we also are a startup consultancy agency where we help startups with their first initial steps and reach their consumers. And I would answer your question in yes and no, both. There are a lot of investors and funders which are hesitant, but there are a lot of businesses which are getting the boom as needed as well. Like our co-panelists shared, every business has seen a very different impact over the past 1.5 years. If I look at Stanley Communications over the past 1.5 years as well, the kind of brands that we are working with, or the kind of the team growth that we've seen over the past 1.5 years, considering the challenges that we've all collectively seen, I would say we've grown. So there are a lot of services, products, which have become essential to today's time and the dynamic changing times. So investors and funders are also looking at investing and reaching out to those brands. So there are two sides to this coin, and both of them are equally happening.
Neetish, your sector, which is touch and feel, experiencing it first, and we have seen this virtual rise of work from home. Where do you see? How does it work out from here on? I know, for example, when tomorrow offices, I'm so sorry, if offices open out, I'm going to stay for 1 week in the office. That's my personal statement. I really want to do this. But tell me, what are you hearing from people? What is your sector looking like? How are you trying to look ahead? More waves come. What are you going to do with your business?
No, absolutely. I think, Ruhail, a lot of people are resonating to your fact, right? They're not, people are fed up of staying at home. I think they want to come out. See, at the end of the day, we're social animals, right? Office is not just workstation and desk for us, but it's interacting with, your colleagues, sort of getting into that team meetings, getting into that hurdles, discussing things, and that face-to-face interaction is important. Yes, what this pandemic has done is essentially created another vertical in which people are saying that, now we can work from home. But is that a permanent solution? Is the entire team, is it possible for the entire team to work from home? That is something that, in a lot of our discussions, we have over 400 clients today. We have like these roundtable meetings that we keep doing with the respective spokes and CEOs of these companies. And essentially, the major feedback that has come from everyone is the fact that, while a certain portion of my office will work from home, but I think majority of guys will come back. Now what they require now is a more agile workspace. That is where we are optimistic on why the outcome of a pandemic is going to be, the post-pandemic world is going to be very, very good for a business like us, because now people want agility, people want flexibility. Earlier, pre-pandemic, everyone was talking about consolidation. Larger clients used to come and say, I've got 2,000 employees sitting out of 3 different buildings. I want to combine all of them into one tower. Now everyone's talking about, I've got this one tower. I want to break it down and give it out to 6 or 7 different locations, right? So that my employees don't have to travel that much. There is some sort of collaboration. So we're not really seeing, work from home affecting our business. Also, India is very, very service packed, right? If you look at our real estate consumption, 60 to 70% of it is actually service packed, which cannot work from home because of data security, because of a lot of reasons through which they can't, right? You had a makeshift solution in the middle because people didn't have a choice there. But eventually, when things open up, people would have to come back to work. So while obviously there has been a lot of talks about this, but I think even the larger brands, you look at TCS, right? Last pandemic, they were talking about shifting completely to work from home, being the largest employer, one of the largest employers. Recently, they came back and said that no, work from home is not the solution. I think it's the third place, which is the solution. So our target is now to become that third place.
Right. No, also the bit about, what are you hearing? I mean, what have you experienced or what are you hearing from your friends when it comes to raising funds now? How are investors looking at putting their money in startups?
No, absolutely. I think there's a lot of interest. Yeah. So, Ruhail, I think there's a lot of interest. So we were lucky. We just raised a round of funding pre-pandemic, right? We raised a round of funding in November 2019. So that sort of helped us, even though we've been profitable, right? We've been profitable for the last 3 years. Not something that you'll hear in a co-working industry. We're a cash guzzling, cash burning industry. But I think the Marwadi genes in me has always sort of kept me focused on profitability. I think, how investors are looking at is funneling growth, right? Whenever you would, I think what this pandemic has done is solidified a lot of businesses, right? Earlier, people were funding concepts, people were funding the fact that, there's a potential to a business, but we don't know in a downturn what will happen. They were taking that risk. What this pandemic has done is sort of eliminated a lot of those companies, which wouldn't have survived through this challenging times when there is a downturn. And the outcome is going to be very positive. People who are going to come out of this are going to be the ones that are going to get funded the most because the interest is there, right? Liquidity is there in the market. People want to fund high growth, fast growing companies. And if you're able to blitz scale from X to 10X, and you can show that regularly, I think the investment, the interest is definitely there. And I think the second point here is that now the shift is changed in which people have now started focusing on cash flow generations. Earlier, it was more about customer acquisitions. How many people can I go and acquire? But I think now it is shifted towards cash flow. Can you be cash positive in a short period of time, right? Because now people want to be cash flow positive in the next 2 to 3 years, right? In order to sort of grow from that. So I think there's definitely a lot of interest, and India is in a very interesting sort of position to capture a lot of the liquidity that is there out there in the market.
Right. Shivam, whether you have, you're doing great in this pandemic, but what are you hearing from the market when it comes to how investors are looking at startups?
So surprisingly, there has been, despite the amount of unpredictability around through the pandemic since the first lockdowns were imposed, I think surprisingly investors have been quite positive. I remember talking to a few tier 1 VCs in the first lockdowns when I remember them telling me that they're in fact investing more than they invested in the same quarter the year before. And this was true for like a multiple number of investors I talked to. We have ourselves closed a round in the pandemic, and I think, and generally, even if we see we track the media, we see that a number of startups across stages, right from early to mid to late stage, have been getting funded through the pandemic across industries. Even some of the industries which have been hit strongly through the pandemic have startups in those industries have also raised funds. So I think overall the sentiment surprisingly has been quite positive despite how unpredictable the situation has been. So yeah.
Vinayak, do you echo these thoughts, or you have observed something very different?
Well, in fact, resonating to what Shivam, Neetish has said, good companies that have survived the pandemic or have made it successfully out of the pandemic have definitely found a lot of market interest, right? The sentiments are very high for companies that can survive more than anything else right now. There is obviously a lot of capital in the market right now. Liquidity has been generated for a lot of individual companies and also for a lot of people. That has led to immense amount of, I would say, deal flows coming in. Investors have become smarter. Definitely, there has been a reduction in terms of just outright investing in companies. Your idea stage companies usually don't see the day of light these days with the investors, but businesses that are generating revenue, businesses that are working towards that unit economics that really favors the investors and also their businesses is seeing a lot of traction. So definitely the market sentiment has been positive overall, and this is here to stay. I feel it's going to come here in the next couple of kind of quarters as well. You're going to see a lot of people focusing on the business metrics, generating revenue, rather than just outright just working on acquisition.
This pandemic has changed all sectors, perennially, in a longer term. I mean, they won't return to the same, what they were, the same entities, the same ecosystems, When it comes to startups, if we compare to what they were at the pre-pandemic stage and what they are now, what are the broad shifts that will stay in this ecosystem? How has this changed the entire startup space in your view?
I feel the startup industry has changed, and for the better. All of our co-panelists said right now, startups and businesses that are surviving and are making through this pandemic are going to grow here on after. So this has also become, as a young generation and the kind of go-getter generation that we are, there's a lot of ideas out there. There's a lot of startup conversation out there. Every second person wants to start their own business, and that's a brilliant thing. But it's come down to survival, adaptability, and how fast you act on your ideation here right now. So the startups here on after that are going to, they're going to start from the scratch or going to grow on further, need to have those three things which are very, very important. You cannot live in a pre-pandemic world, and I think it's also for the best. There's a lot of positive outcomes that have come out of this pandemic as well. We are forced to, and we're not just forced to, but we're forced to learn and act upon that moment. We are forced to constantly innovate our ideas and change, because every 10 days or every 5 days, something is changing. Here, there's no certainty. One day you're in lockdown, one day you're in night curfew, one day there's a consumer consuming an X product, the other day there's not. So again, like I said, what I've seen is in the kind of brands that I work with is there's a large sector of brands which is becoming essential to the consumer. So a couple of months ago when we were back in April and we were trying to analyze what strategies do we adapt for our brands as well, we understood each brand has a sentiment or a product which is essential to the consumer, be it at home or when they step out or the hope for when they step out. So startups are also analyzing all of these points and are acting on it. So it's changing, but for the better, I think.
Neetish, how do you see this shift? I mean, how do you see the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem having changed perennially? What changes would stay
I
for
think
long?
two things. Yeah, I think Ruhail, two things have become very, very critical now. It's firstly the foundation that you lay for your business, right? Because now you need to be prepared with something like this. We're like honestly, 2 years back, if you're talking to any startup founder, right, they were saying that high growth stage, we want to grow the company, we want to get more and more customers. No one was really talking about a downturn. But now that we've gone through this entire phase, people will start focusing on creating a solid foundation that if this is to happen ever again, you are sort of protecting your downside in it. And I think the second thing is execution, right? Everyone's realized that execution is going to become key. Gone are the days where people used to take years to pivot. I think you have to now make businesses very agile and nimble, in which you're able to pivot very quickly whenever opportunity arises. You're able to pounce onto it. For example, one of the things that we realized during the pandemic is the shift of technology in workspaces. Real estate has seen limited amount of technology into it, right? Prop tech, while it exists as a category, it hasn't really seen a lot of sort of action happening in it. But what this pandemic has done is accelerated it by 5 years, right? Now we have started talking about things like calling the lifts with your phone, creating a completely digital touchless solution, ordering coffee through your phone and it automatically dispensing, right? So all of these things were good in concept pre-pandemic, but I think they've started becoming reality now. So I think you need to sort of be ahead of where others are. You want to be where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is. And I think the second thing is you have to focus on execution and make sure that your business is as agile as possible, so that when and if there is any situation that like this, you're able to sort of navigate through it.
Shivam, the gold run that you are witnessing, the great growth that you are witnessing, are you also prepared that things might change, or are you very confident that this is the way it is going to be? So what are your learnings, and how do you see the space changing as we move on?
I think, as everyone on the panel has said, the pandemic has been definitely a test of resilience for startups across the board. And I think considering that it's been a decent amount of time as well, it's been more than a year, it's built new habits. And instead of if it was the pandemic period was just a 2-3 month period, then we could have maybe thought about that, okay, this was just for a brief period of time and we're going to go back to exactly the way we were before the pandemic. But given that the amount of time we have been living this way has also been decent, it's been more than a year. So I think most of the habits we have picked up are here to stay for the good. One of the most personally one of the topics which I'm personally very interested in is to observe how the working model of startups evolve post the pandemic, because as everyone's been talking about, the difference in opinions from like being very comfortable with a completely remote environment to some sort of a third place environment, which we are more looking forward to now. I think that is a very important topic to talk about, because
Right.
it obviously impacts the life of everyone and all the employees, everyone involved in the startup. And considering that it's changed, just completely changed how much time we spend in a day and how we spend our time in a day on work and on non-work activities. I think we should definitely. It's going to be very interesting to see how the startup ecosystem takes it forward and what kind of hybrid models evolve. So I'm going to be looking forward to that specifically. And in terms of our...
Before moving to Vinayak, first your quick thoughts, and then one last question where we all get 30 seconds. Yes, Vinayak, your quick thoughts.
Work from home is here to stay, I believe. And this is something
Neetish
that's
is
good.
smiling.
And I believe that there will be hybrid models that will kick in. People have something called a Zoom fatigue that's building in. But the convenience that people get, right, when they're working from home is unparalleled to anything else. And there's absolutely no harm in an industry where we are, where if trust can be built in with your employees, having a hybrid model or a complete remote model is definitely here to stay. You get the best of the talent across the globe, right, when you have a remote option. And that's something that most of the companies will want to look forward to accepting. And Shivam here will also resonate to it. Not so much with Neetish, definitely, but people will realize that it's easier to hire across when there is a hybrid or at least a remote model built in.
Final question. I have 5 minutes coming to you, Jessica. Your key learnings from these last 2 years as a as a startup founder. What are your key learnings?
Resilience like no other. Keep expanding, in my business at least, keep expanding the industries. Do not limit yourself to one industry, because this is a very vast environment, and the more comfortable you are with working with F&B, technology, automotive, and different sectors, the more you're going to grow. And handling the team sizing and the cash burn is something which has been a very important learning in the past 1 year. So, and adaptability. So these 4 learnings have been very key to me, and that's what's making me go ahead and keep going.
No, absolutely. I think there's been a lot of learning, but I think just to sort of bring my perspective onto Vinayak's point, I also believe work from home is here to stay. I have no doubt on that. But when you get to a critical scale, right, when you have 50, 60, 100 people, it's easier to do work from home. But when you get to a 2,000, 3,000 sort of number, it becomes very difficult. And that's the market that we are targeting, right? When you go after clients who are working on R&D centers, when you're going after clients who are working on developing solutions for banking, financial services, all of these guys, it's impossible for them to work from home, right? When you're talking about smaller, nimble teams, fair enough. Yeah, those guys can. So I think the biggest learning has been, sort of mitigate your risk, make sure that you are capturing all aspects. You're not focusing on one sort of business, very similar to Jessica, right? In which, our focus pretty much was on tech before, in which we were trying to get IT companies to come into our space. But now we've diversified with a lot of BFSI, we've got manufacturing companies and all of them also entering into our ecosystem. And I think we're very optimistic on how the future is going to be, right? Honestly, right before the second wave, Jan, Feb, March was some of the best months for us, in which we grew almost 30 to 40% in our business. And our business base is huge, right? We've got 75,000 working seats today, and growing 75,000, 30% of 75,000 working seats is a significant amount, right? So I think we're very, very optimistic on how the future is going to be. And we've already seen that growth. Last couple of months have been fantastic for us. And, hopefully, fingers crossed, right, we're going to blitz scale from here.
Paperless world, that's where we're headed. What do you say? And what are your key learnings from this? Is everybody not taking a print out?
I think more importantly, one is the ability to just drop your assumptions and adapt to whatever is happening, as Jessica said. I think that's definitely a big learning. Everyone before the pandemic used to believe that working from remote cannot be productive. All sales meetings have to happen in face-to-face setups. I think all of us have seen how that changed, and how we just held strong unvalidated assumptions before the pandemic. Secondly, I think seeing the impact of digital platforms and digital media has been the second biggest learning for me. Seeing that how we have managed to build and grow our business entirely through digital means is a learning which, again, we before the pandemic we would have assumed that that's not possible. There's a lot of physical element that is required, but it's been proved the opposite has been proved post the pandemic. So I think going ahead, it's very important for everyone to also keep in mind that digital, the most important marketing channel is digital.
Final words, Vinayak, your key learnings from this.
My key learnings have been very simple. Focus on your business and focus on the execution. Everything else will fall in line. Ensure that the people that you have trust in stick around, and your team is going to be your biggest strength no matter what happens. And I think pandemic has made everyone realize that anything and everything is possible. So brace yourselves for the worst possible scenarios and the best possible scenarios in all the given times. Like Jessica and Neetish and Shivam have been talking about on this platform. It's all about innovating, staying ahead of the curve. And I believe that we definitely have a great second half of the year in front of us right now.
So there's some good news. I just got this message that people are loving this. They want 10 more minutes. So great. Here you go with another set of questions. So if you ask me, I would say hybrid is the way. Nobody asked me, but I'm just putting it. Hybrid is the way. Of course, you're not going to get stuck at home all the time and not at office. Of course, I think there's going to be some kind of arrangement. God knows what. Coming to you, Jessica, a lot of, the business sentiment never goes away, no matter the time you are in, whether pandemic, not pandemic or whatever. A lot of startups, the people, youngsters are coming up with their own ideas right now and trying to raise funds and start being there and being having your own successful company, all of you. What is your advice to them, right now, since you've been there, what would you like to tell them when they look at starting a new business?
Everyone starting out their business right now has to look at the situation very differently, I would say, as to at least when I was starting out. I would say I have learned a lot on the job, and I'm sure everyone out there, your experience teaches you a lot. But whereas, and failures also affect you a lot. But when it comes to startups in today's time, I wouldn't say failures, but the environment responding to your business or responding to your ideology is something which is also controlled by too many external factors right now. So to keep going and not letting that affect you is the biggest advice, because here things are changing so rapidly. Even 4 years into our business, we're also trying to adapt and understand it. So to have a very strong model in place, the execution needs to be very, very fast. And do not let the external situation affect every single action of your company within. Be it your, outreach or your team or anything, be it a hybrid model, be it getting a workspace. Just keep a focus and have a 6-month plan or a 1-year plan, because this year and the past year has taught us things, get a little different and they come back to normal, and then something again happens. So don't get affected by every month or every 15 days scenario changing.
Right. Neetish, what would you like to?
No, absolutely. I think I completely agree with Jessica on the points that she said. In fact, to add to that, I think 2 things, which is, I think my mantra to sort of what I've learned is, first, never chase money, right? At the end of the day, funding is not the only thing. It will come. If your business is strong enough, if your foundation is strong enough, if you know that the business has the potential to get to a certain scale, it's always going to come, right? And never focus on that. And second is don't be scared of making mistakes. I think that's one of the few things that we did upfront early, where we made a few mistakes. We realized that these were some things that we could have avoided, but that really helped us grow stronger, right? Today, and looking back in hindsight, if I hadn't made those mistakes, maybe we would have been in a very different situation, today. So I think these 2 things, over and above what Jessica said, is something that I would like to sort of highlight.
I think just echoing what everyone has already talked about. One is focus, which, as Vinayak said, it's just about just focusing on the right things, not caring about what's happening around too much. And second is resilience. As Jessica was talking about, that things keep on changing. Hopefully we are past the hardest part of the pandemic, but things are going to go up and down, but you have to keep your focus and just continue moving ahead.
Finally, yes, Vinayak, your thoughts on this?
Oh, no, I'm just going to be +1 to what everyone said. Everyone's covered most of the things that I would have said. So definitely not much to add, but yeah, resilience and focus is going to be key factors for everyone.
There's another point, being an entrepreneur is not just about raising capital and, having a great company. It's also about your mindset, and maintaining that mindset. You have your moments of weakness as well. We're all human beings. We're not machines, right? It's not just about this pandemic that people have felt weak or challenged. I think it has been all through the journey of an entrepreneur. Jessica, what is your mantra of, getting over those situations? Is it like waking up at 4, doing that yoga? What is that keeps you sane in this mad environment? It's, of course, cutthroat out there,
It's very, very cutthroat. Absolutely. But I'm not into any of those things, waking up at 4 o'clock, etc. For me, balance is a very important factor of life. Some of my friends call me and my family calls me a workaholic, and I love being that. But I also give equal attention to every part of my life. And I think one thing that's kept me sane all of these years is I don't believe in the idea of competition. An X company or a Y company is going to do what they're going to do. I have to just keep the focus on myself. Because if I start seeing what are they doing, then then I'm not going on the right path already. I've always tried to maintain this. I just need to keep the focus on myself, my business model, and keeping my team together, keeping them sane and getting their inputs as well. And in my industry, just understanding how the client is growing and how the client is also adapting to the situation has really helped me keeping sane and also always being positive towards no matter what the situation is.
Right, Neetish.
No, absolutely. I think one of my biggest learning, I think, through this entire journey in the last 4 years has been letting go of things, right? As entrepreneurs, we're so close to the thing that we've created that we don't realize when we have to let it go. When we started off Smartworks, we started off with about 12 or 13 employees. Today, we are over 450 people, right? So essentially, you need to create that second layer of leaders coming in, making sure they're, resonating with what your vision of the brand is and what you're trying to create, and make sure you empower them to sort of work through there, because when you're scaling at the rate at which we are, you can't do it all on your own, right? And as entrepreneurs, we're so close to this product that it becomes very difficult for us to let go. So I think that's one of the things that has really helped me engage with my team. I make sure my leaders are always interacting with each other. We have these sessions on almost a weekly basis. We do out, even in these pandemic times, we've been having these Zoom calls between all of us, trying to engage, ideate between different divisions. If you keep everyone sort of engaged with each other, right, you're able to create a much better team out of it. So I think, that's just the mantra that I sort of try to follow when you're scaling up with many people coming onto your company.
So Jessica's, not looking at the competition and you letting go, I feel like I'm in a spiritual class. Great. I mean, Shivam, what about you?
I think I completely agree with Neetish there. When we start out, it's usually we are so connected to our startups and to our initiatives that we spend most of our waking time just thinking about the problems and thinking about the possible solutions to those problems throughout. Even when we are not actively working, not in sitting in front of a laptop, not on a phone, even when we are eating, we are walking around, we tend to think a lot about that. And I think my learning has been that through the pandemic has been that it's very important to continuously detach and remind yourself that it's at the end of the day a business, and a business has its own problems. A business, like we exist in a very, very competitive environment and in a very dynamic environment. So it's very important to continuously detach and move ahead and not get too affected by problems. And I think that's my learning.
Final words, Vinayak.
Final words would be around, entrepreneurial side of the journey is always about, two sides of the coin. One is being obsessive with what you're building, and the other one is, getting emotionally attached. What we have realized, and what personally I have kind of understood in the last 1 year is, because of so many losses that everyone has had personally in their lives, getting emotionally attached to something definitely, clouds your judgment over things. It's always better to be obsessive with something to try and make it succeed. But there has to be a line between what really kind of works and what doesn't work. You need to understand at some point of letting go of things, like Neetish said. And at times, our industry is something where it's super competitive. You have to know what the competitors are doing at all times to stay ahead of the curve. So unfortunately, there I wouldn't resonate too much with Jessica, but understanding what Neetish and Shivam is saying, that it's all about the mindset at the end of the day. The entrepreneurial mindset and the journey is a pretty lonely one at the start. You have to kind of get used to it. Anyone who's looking to start during the pandemic also has to realize that this is one journey that will change your life for good, no matter what happens with the company. But be obsessive. Don't be way too emotionally attached, because at some point you also have to understand that there is a lot of people attached to your business that need to succeed with it.
Perfect. So I'm done with this time, and thank you so much for these lovely thoughts. It's been a great conversation.